Dear colleagues, dear friends, welcome to everybody who has joined in to our today's webinar. The topic of today is for more than 3 years of recovery, what has been done, what will be next. Maria Rybko, I'm the moderator today. I'm the Deputy Director for the Center of Economic Strategy, and we are making this summary event after the 3 years of operation of our joint project, Controlling Costs on the Recovery of Ukraine, which is financed by the European Union. This project, together with me and together with this center, also the Institute of Economic Research and Political Consultations. Also, we have Oleksandra Betliy, who represents this center from this institute, and as the NGO Technologies in Progress, Max Nefiodov, who was responsible for the development of our recovery portal. All of these organizations are members of the RISE coalition. We appreciate the assistance of the European Union, that they have supported the project of monitoring, civil monitoring, related to the expenditures to recovery and reconstruction. And basically now I will do some housekeeping issues.
For those of you who are listening and watching us in English, there is the translation available in the bottom panel of Zoom. Please turn it on and enjoy the discussion.
I'd like to remind to all the participants that you can keep your comments and questions either in the Q&A or in the chat. Whatever is more convenient for you, we'll try to reply to them. And basically, I'd like to present to you our first speakers. Today, we have asked to make the introductory words, to say some welcoming speech of Henrik Wittfeldt, the head of the Human Development and the representation of the European Union. Please, Mr. Henrik, the floor is yours. And he will be back to us. Next, all right, let me explain to you while Henrik is reconnected. So for those of you who have joined us in, after the introductory words, we will have the senior economist of the Center of Economic Strategy, Natalia Kolesnichenko, will talk what exactly was being rebuilt during the last 3 years of the war, which were the successes, and will open up the details of procurement construction. Also, Oleksandra Betliy, who is the expert of the Institute of Economic Research and Political Consultations, will explain how the sub-grantees of the projects were monitoring the recovery of particular objects they were visiting, making photos, talking to the local authorities, what they have managed to find out. And finally, Maxim Nefiodov will explain how he sees the future of our big portal, where all this monitoring is placed, big recovery portal. After that, we will ask to the discussion Maryna Denysiuk, the Deputy Minister for the Development of Hromadas and Territories, Viktor Nestulia, the head of the project Office Dream. Colleagues will explain what will be happening next, what will be happening with the public investment management, with managing public investments. I can see that Mr. Henrik is back to us.
Please, could you start this discussion?
Yes, apologies for this technical hiccup. So you can hear me now? Yes. Okay, very good. So dear friends and colleagues, I'm very happy to be here today to take stock on the results of the Recovery Watchdog program. So it's a very challenging time, but the EU continues to provide large-scale support to mitigate the consequences of the military aggression of Russia against Ukraine. So both when it concerns support to reconstruction of damaged infrastructure, but also in the recovery and growth of businesses, especially SMEs. So in this context, initiatives like the Recovery Watchdog is key to strengthen transparency and accountability within the reconstruction sector. These are essential principles and conditions for our financing of the recovery and reconstruction, actually. So well-organized monitoring by CSO is an important element of public oversight, leading to more efficient and effective recovery spending in a country like Ukraine. It also builds trust within society to both the Ukrainian government's efforts and partners' support. So that said, for us, this is a very important interventions, and we will be very happy to hear about the results and the conclusions coming from these 3 years of program. So the Recovery Watchdog project will be ending in its current context in December this year. So, but it's an understanding that the achievements of this activity or the program should not be lost. On the contrary, actually. So the key elements of public oversight should be preserved and further developed into a larger scale. And one element to do this is that the big recovery portal should be integrated into the DREAM ecosystem as a public engagement and civil oversight component of key PIM data. It should ensure real-time access to investment project life cycles and funding, as well as crowdsource data about implementation status and complaints. So I believe strongly that this approach will be highly beneficial for government, donors, experts, media, civil society, and the public at large. And we, as the European Union, we continue to we aim to continue our support in this area and for this work. So with that, I wish you a good workshop today, and then I'm looking forward to working very closely with you also in the future. Thanks.
Thanks a lot for these kind words.
Many thanks for these kind words, and thank you so much for the support. It's a great pleasure for us to work with the European Union, and we believe that this project really deserves to be supported, and the civil voices from the regions, they definitely need to be heard and shown. That is something that we're trying to make sure we do. So now I'm coming to the first part of our today's event. This project, let me remind you, every month we are making monitoring, we are issuing a report about what has happened already in the recovery and reconstruction over the previous months. And this report can be found as earlier on the Big Recovery portal and on the websites of our organizations. But in case my colleagues do show this report from the screen, so today we would like to focus not so much on the results of the last months, but more on some more generalized summary of how this recovery has been happening in Ukraine. And I'd like to take the floor. Natalia Kolesnichenko. Natalia is the senior economist of the Center of Economic Strategy. She can tell us what has been happening in the reconstruction over the 3 years. Thank you, Maria. So, unfortunately, we have the data regarding reconstruction that's somewhat limited. We're not seeing what exactly within this particular line. We don't have any specific statistics like how this much money was spent on the recovery. So we're looking at Prozoro, at construction procurement, and we can believe this could be the data that could be used for the recovery. But again, this is not the exhaustive list on the one hand. On the other hand, they are a little bit excessive because not construction procurement pertains to the recovery as such. So within 3 years, we have spent significant amounts, almost 300 billion hryvnia every year, $7-8 billion this year. According to our estimates, there will be another the same, 300 billion, but also very interesting that the third of the procurement comes to Q4 of last year, of each year, meaning the procurement in 23, 24, and most likely this year, 25. The procurement is happening at the end of the year. This is happening with a certain specifics of spending public funds, although according to our opinion, it would be much more feasible to rebuild and to use this money more evenly to make sure it would be more effective. The next slide, please. So the biggest procurements over these years, these are the lots, these tenders that went on to support the infrastructure, and part of them directly is connected with the recovery of the lost infrastructure. In case we talk about the loss of the Kakhovka reservoir and the loss of water supply in the southern region, a lot of money was used to build up the water intake for Mykolaiv and for Kryvyi Rih and for Marganets. Big amounts were also spent on the Seretska-Pecherska line of the Kiev Metro Municipal Enterprise. It can't be said that it's exactly recovery, but this is true. We also continue to recover educational and medical institutions, and quite a lot of money is spent to protect energy infrastructure on the recovery of the losses that are incurred by Ukraine after Russia's attacks. Of course, among the leaders, based on the construction procurement, it's Kiev. It's not only this subway line, it is connected that the local budget of Kiev is one of the biggest in Ukraine. That's why these volumes are also so big. And the frontline areas, they're also among the leaders of the ones who are rebuilding and who are spending lots of money. This is also Kharkiv Oblast. I mean, these are also the ones who are losing a lot in infrastructure. Kharkiv Oblast, Odessa Oblast, when it comes to the port infrastructure. Nevertheless, there are certain problems with procurement. One of them pertains to the low competitiveness. This is something that some part of the procurement is happening with one participant, and we can't say that we can see any improvement in the competitiveness of this procurement. Also, still remains quite high is the share of the pre-threshold procurement, meaning the ones that are taking place outside of the electronic system. At the same time, with the procurement that is happening with the biggest number of participants, over these 3 years, we can clearly see the decrease of the price, and they're quite significant. We have a direct dependence. The more we have the participants, the lower is the decrease of the price. And of course, this is happening with the procurement of lesser volume. This is less seen. The project documentation became less by 80%, but even with some big procurement, this decrease of the price is still noticeable. The next slide. We can also say that the procurement is happening quite quickly. The overwhelming majority lasts within 2 months, and only 6% lasted longer than 50 days. This year, the duration of procurements increased slightly, but once again, this could also be connected with the budget procedures, and until the end of the year, this can become similar to the levels of the previous years. We have quite a small number of procurements which are appealed. Its share has remained quite stable within these 3 years. So the ones who are procuring and the companies who participate in the procurement more or less are satisfied with this process. Next slide. Also important to mention, we have the recovery agency that is spending some significant funds, both directly, although the procurement is connected more with the organizing the processes. For instance, services to support projects that are financed by the international financial institutions, but also significant funds are allocated via the regional recovery services. It comes down to roads, energy infrastructure, and some other needs exactly via the recovery agencies based in oblasts. Also, we have looked at the statistics of how the local budgets financed the recovery. This was also a very interesting database of the Center of the Research of the Fiscal Policy. We now have data for 23 and 24. So the biggest were connected with the spendings in the city, knowing that the city budgets are bigger versus rural areas, naturally, compared to some smaller settlements. The leader remains Kiev, but the biggest contribution, the overwhelming majority of the expenditures, except for Kiev, these are in the frontline regions because the depths of damages is most compared to other regions of Ukraine. So the biggest was reconstructed is housing. In 2023, this was education. In 2024, the leadership went to housing. And also, Kiev remains a leader, and followed by Donetsk Oblast as well as other frontline regions. Next slide, please. But unfortunately, the war isn't going. The destruction grows. This year, the losses are even higher than what they used to be last year. new destructions have significantly increased because Russia is actively shelling also some more remote areas. So we can make some summary. The reconstruction lags behind destruction, but the procurement of construction have already reached to 20 billion American dollars, but this is still much less than what we need for the recovery based on the assessment that was done according to RDNA 4, the needs for recovery in the area of housing, educational, medical, utilities, municipal services, water supplies, they actually have amounted to $190 billion. So these small volumes, that's what's limited. I mean, the war is ongoing, and of course the priority is the military expenditures. Nevertheless, recovery is necessary, despite the risks of destruction still remain. This is in a certain way the resilience of the country, because if we don't recover, people will be leaving the frontline areas, and not only frontline, but also significant losses. They limit economic activity, and in all settlements, that's why the recovery is very much necessary. To make sure it's more effective, cheaper for the state, and of course much more high quality, we need to take into account not only, I mean, in the first place, the priorities of the local hromadas and to set up some prioritization. It's also important to have some strategic planning, meaning that the expenditures of the budget have to be allocated to several years and planned well ahead. There must be sustainable and stable financing rather than a huge fluctuation during the year, with the provision of continuity of procurement. It's important to control them and further develop a risk-oriented approach to monitor the procurement and unifying classifiers of procurement and the like. And of course, it's very important to have the increase of the competition in procurement through opening up cost estimates. More transparent access to data will give the society the possibility to control the process in a much more high-quality manner. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Natalia. Absolutely, I agree that the recovery is so much necessary. One of the main messages for our partners should be not to give money for the recovery, but also let's make it together to make sure that Russia would go away from Ukraine. And for this, we would also need the finances, the assistance, the ammunition, and the goodwill. And I now would like to invite Oleksandra Betliy to take the floor. Oleksandra, together with other sub-grantees of our project and the Institute, she was checking on how physical recovery is happening on the ground, what was well rebuilt, what was not really well rebuilt, and whether the needs of the people are taken into account, the ones who have low mobility, and other very important and very interesting factors that you could see on the ground if you visit yourself. I'd like to welcome everybody. When we were just coming up with the idea of the project, the idea came up to make sub-grants for the local organizations. Why? Because on top, as Natalia has just explained, we can see certain figures, but we're not seeing what exactly is done with the recovery, and we understand ourselves that the recovery is the phenomenon which is local. So the whole recovery is still a very local phenomenon. It's done in separate hromadas, in individual hromadas, so we should see what is happening there. So within the project, we have been providing 61 grants to 35 organizations, and there were two competitions. First of all, this was the monitoring of recovery and recovery on the spot, on the ground. We were checking how it was built. We were talking to the interest parties. And the second was the monitoring of procurement to see which problems are there in the procurement. With this said, As a result of the monitoring, we had some 800 objects. We concentrated on the social infrastructure, the housing centers for administrative purposes, because for the recovery of the critical infrastructure such as roads or bridges, there should be a different level. And the monitorings were happening using this similar one methodology, and the results are now provided on the recovery portal. The results are in the form of the questionnaires I mentioned, and there are some photographs related to the first competition. So BRP has become our coordination mechanism to make sure that we could coordinate grantees and other organizations who is monitoring what, and this could be done transparently, and you could see the results. The methodology was used quite comprehensive, it's quite big, because we wanted to see how exactly the recovery is planned, whether the public society, civil society is engaged in what is happening on the ground, how they set up the priorities, and what is happening with the procurement. And that's what was said, that it's important for us to understand. We understand that this is urgent recovery, not comprehensive recovery, but we still need to stick to build back better principles. So in this particular context, the grantees were looking at the barrier-free access, especially for the wheelchaired people, because for people with poor eyesight, it's even more difficult monitoring. And we're also looking to make sure that at least there would be tactile strips, the Braille's script print on these tables. So we were trying to understand, and we found out that the engagement of public and community is quite low. When in early 2025, when communities began to develop reconstruction and recovery plans, now they only need the strategy of the regional development. Residents of apartment buildings often do not have enough information about the reconstruction of their homes, and their wishes are not taken into account. When should they wait to go home, what's been done, and this is not correct. Because nowadays, people need this confidence that what is happening and when they can go back home, because home is very important. Clients, including donors, and we want to really emphasize on this, that in case we talk often about donors, we can see that there is a really great practices, but not always so. Sometimes donors don't like transparencies, and sometimes donors or the ones who are the benefactors, they're not always involving the public or the end users in discussions about how you want to have it done. They do it on their own. So the reconstruction and restoration, it's not always, as it turned out, about the recovery after the destruction and losses. Some projects, thanks to the liquidation funds, it was also mentioned when we had the program which was called the Big Construction, the priority remains, again, according to what the authorities think, what we want to rebuild and which way we could submit the project. 25% of projects were not implemented within the original planned time frame, and this is connected with the construction sector when they simply are missing people. And after the SU inspections, costs are often reduced due to the revisions of estimates, but at the same time it was very interesting when our grantees were looking at the recovery of the apartment houses in Kiev. And that's where we had the unique situation. Most often the cost estimates went down and even works were reconsidered. They refused from winterization, and sometimes they simply would go down in their cost estimates, which said that probably the first cost estimates were way too high. When we talk about the barrier-free, unfortunately, the majority of the projects do not meet accessibility standards. We're talking about the barrier-free, especially when it comes to wheelchaired people. Sometimes, or actually often, it's the case that We simply didn't think about it, or why bother? One director of the school said that I don't have such children and I don't want to put in money into barrier-free access. Nevertheless, people with disability, such as veterans, could be the ones who could be teaching at schools or could work in such institutions or to be parents of children in schools. That means that the access to school will be closed to them because somebody at school didn't think about the accessibility issue. Sometimes the design engineers say, let them switch to chairs with big wheels, then we would not need to refuse from thresholds. That's also a bad idea in general, and quite sad to hear this. And I really hope that the program related to the barrier-free access and the advocacy of the Ministry of the Development will still materialize in all the webinars that are being held nowadays, that this viewpoint of the local authorities and the directors of the institutions will change. For this, you would also need to change the idea of the project engineers, because the standards for construction, we actually had new international standards introduced, and they have to reteach themselves rather than just closing their eyes to barrier-free. Sometimes they say that they wanted the best, but it turned out as usual, when accessibility is implemented as they think, but it's not in accordance with the standards, and actually damaging more than it's helping, but still it's here. So once again, we need to have training, we have to need clarifications to make sure that it's done correctly. The barrier-free is different. Sometimes it's ramps, special good stairs, because children, if they run quickly, sometimes when there is air siren, they should move really quickly. There are also cases when they have simply gradual stairways, so people don't risk to fall down. Sometimes when there is no possibility, or when they didn't do any barrier-free access for stairs, they are buying lifts, what you can see on the slide, to make sure at least they would have some opportunity to help the person go up the stairs. Once again, what we were seeing, sometimes accessibility and dignity in general, they're not always taken into account when they put the toilets, like the toilets one near to the other, without doors, without partitions. That's a big question, how in the world this could have been done and how this is done. And sometimes, as you can see on this slide, on the right in the bottom, they first did, like, seems like this is the ramp, but it doesn't meet the requirements because they have steps there. Then they said that we need to do something, because mothers, when they're picking up their children, they need to wait somewhere when there is a rain, and they put this rain fall, and it's not perfect at all. Once again, there are some good cases when they're making real barrier-free toilets, where things are really thought through, and sometimes they can make the ramp, and sometimes you really can go through with the wheelchair, but there is no toilet. So these are the limitations for people with disability to use such institutions. This is also true for libraries, because sometimes you need to go to the toilet. One of our grantees had an institution in Kiev Oblast where everything is inside, but in order to reach the toilet, there are 3 steps when a wheelchair person will not be able to overcome them. And then on the right, this little rail, it seems like it's been done, but they did it absolutely not moving, and it's not like really good. There are some shelters which have interesting designs, but sometimes children are really afraid of them, and children don't want to go there because it is really not interesting, or sometimes it's frightening. There on this slide you can see Gostomel Hromada, 2 schools. They have the entrance to this shelter looks like this. I think it will be very interesting for the children to go in there because it doesn't frighten back. When children are depressed with the war, of course, we should pay attention to this. Once again, this barrier-free access remains a good motto, but we will teach about that. And it's my pleasure that our grantees that were making projects with the monitoring, they also become the advocates of the barrier-free, and they can make this barrier-free access is very ideal. Sometimes they think it's too expensive, or it's too... Sometimes they also don't think about it. And always, sometimes when the monitoring of procurement is happening, sometimes simply difficult to monitor because of the simplified procurement norms, not because of the corruption, but because it's more simple like this. But of course, the corruption is still not excluded, so the changes should take place. These lessons have to be taken into account for the big recovery. We will be presenting our book in 1 month. We will be presenting everybody, inviting everybody. There will be lots of interesting stories and our lessons learned, what needs to be done for the future. It's very interesting. Absolutely. I would be very happy to hear these stories about our project. But looking forward, I would like to ask Max. He is the developer and the inspirer of the big recovery portal, the one who puts together all the activities under the project, the analytical, the monitoring, the IT. Max, please let me know how these 3 years are for you and what are your plans for the future. Colleagues, good afternoon. Very happy to everybody who connected to listen to us, and it's really a rare case when we tried to risk and to show this portal alive rather than slides. This is always a stress for the developers because the tradition is that within 5 minutes until the start, something needs to be broken, but I really hope that everything will be all right. So I'm very much convinced that within these 3 years, the portal BRP has grown up and has become bigger than what I expected when we were just starting. Of course, as everybody in 2022, nobody could imagine what would be the end of 2025, and we went through some peaks of euphoria and disappointment sometimes, and some things didn't materialize and the needs were not there, and some things which we counted on, some maybe adjacent projects that were supposed to implement something, they also didn't take place. So this was exactly the challenge for the future. Let me first start off by saying what we managed and what we could use and what people are using every day, more than I would expect. So we are very much happy with the cooperation with the Dream Team, because when we just started in 2022, there was not even such a word, dream. Of course, thinking that the state could build such a strong and comprehensive system, ecosystem of supporting the instruments of recovery, and sometimes by insisting, sometimes with convincing people to go in there. We didn't have these expectations in the beginning. This is all that happened. Everything is working, and irrespective of all the challenges and changes, the changes in normative, other things, dissatisfactions, it's very difficult to move everything into digital, but it is working, it is updated every day, the conflict of data resolved. So you can see this, these figures, some general statistics, and it's clear that you could disclose them, open up them, and deep dive. And now, most likely, we are resolving the issue in which way it should be represented for the regular user, because there are lots of data available at the Dream or QA, and which are meant more for professional users and state officials rather than the civil society or the taxpayers. So let me remind you, on our first page, apart from that, you can see all these products and announcements talked about before by Maria, Oleksandra, and other colleagues. You can see links to analytics, the last projects checked, the latest standards for business, and the like. And it's clear that the biggest value of what we are doing is exactly our map where we are reflecting, and we are putting there all the objects from Dream, as well as some objects that we are adding there manually from information from the sub-grantees or by information from some donors who, one way or the other, while Dream was not mandatory, they didn't appear there, or when information is entered by thousands of people, there could be some gaps, mistakes, they simply happen. That's the story that doesn't end. But again, this is the usefulness that we contribute by improving all of this data. In the same way, you can deep dive into each project and check on your own what is happening there, starting from some general data and all the way to our automatic risk monitoring, which we are also very proud of, which allows to give at least preliminary information for our partners and the civil organizations in the regions, and simply for the viewers what to concentrate attention on and what could be a significant risk or the absence of such a risk. It's clear that we do have the analytics, and we are trying more and more to concentrate not only on our analytical reports, but rather also on cooperation with partners and collecting all the news that pertains to the issue related to the recovery. Once again, already now it looks better than we expected. Even the name itself, analytics, it foresaw that there would be a section where we'll be putting up all of these reports and beautiful presentations that were showing before that. But this really grew into hundreds and hundreds. I think it's more than 150 various types of news, from good examples to really bad examples, to statistics, to analytics, to links to materials of partners. We would be really happy that this would become more one way or the other, because there is no other way, no other resource. When a person who wants to find out about the recovery could read somewhere where all the information is concentrated, never the web pages of the ministers can become the resource that the person would go there and read just the press releases from the Ministry of Recovery. For the bureaucrat, this is not very interesting at all. The story that we managed partially, this is the story about the statistics. I already recollected this issue related to the quality of data. It's not about mistakes, or it's not that the Dream colleagues are not being perfect. It's evident the quality of the data when entered manually, when it's built on the go, it can't be perfect. As an example, we can look at this status of the recovery projects. Of course, there are many more finished projects than 2%, but the problem is that a lot of initiators of the projects, they are not mentioning them in Dream as completed. I mean, common sense, like closed contracts, payments made. Even in the system, we see that this object, I mean, there are photographs already. It should be definitely finished. So somehow this is also an issue. We have to also from our side close them, which is again, I don't know to the extent this is correct or not, because always there could be some other additional approvals and things like that. There is also another challenge in terms of the quality of data related to the sources of financing. This is still a problem, although we are cleaning this manually and we are running a big Excel table when we are trying to decode everything. Nevertheless, there are a lot of still problems. It also pertains to the sectoral analysis and some other stories. I recollect this not just to say that that doesn't make sense or the work that we are doing that you can't rely on that. But simply, this is the issue that needs to be went. It should really be overcome. It should really become perfect when your heart is really happy when you see the data. We are also trying to concentrate, and we're trying to show information regarding tenders and about procurement, because this is the issue which is often reflecting certain problem tendencies. For instance, related to the completed tenders, you could see that the speed of recovery, softly speaking, is not speeding up. And in this, there are some objective problems with financing, with the quality of the projects, and the like. This is the story that we, again, are trying to show those metrics when we are not duplicating Prozoro, but we are trying to deep dive into this analytics. And finally, the civil oversight. That is something that we are doing ourselves. I'm very happy about that, because I didn't even expect that we can reach a point where now more than 700 objects are being monitored. 625 have at least one completed monitoring. That's a great achievement of the whole ecosystem. More than 40 civil organizations have been working with the portal. Also, separately, I would always like to emphasize that the majority of the reports, they are not negative. The negative reports are less than 5%. Even if you summarize the ones where there is not enough information. Nevertheless, it shows that in general, the recovery is moving. And no matter what we said about corruption, about problems with inclusivity and some other poor quality projects, but if you look at the macro level, still, this is something that we can say that we succeeded here. The civil oversight, this is the block where we are trying to shed light on all the organizations who are working with us. Many thanks to them. Of course, you can click on each of these projects, see what they're doing, which objects are within monitoring stage, which objects have already been inspected. This is in Irpin. This city is a leader in terms of the objects. 252 reports already have been worked on, 10 are still in progress. And this is like any random object that you could really look up. The result of the analysis, these photographs, these are the photographs are from Dream, and once again, more information in the system is missing. At the same time, in case you click through, you will see that in reality there is a lot to be proud of. This house doesn't look bad, rebuilt. This is some positive story about. For business, this is the section that, once again, I would really want that we would be more active about it in the future, not looking that we have already implemented all the functionality which we would want, and even more. Here you can also compare by clicking this slider, information between all construction tenders and the ones which are connected with the projects of recovery that are in Dream. Nevertheless, unfortunately, Prozoro itself, the story with the detailed analysis of cost estimates, it was not perfectly implemented, although Verkhovna Rada adopted a law that they should be in the machine reading format. Still, we do have issues with classifier of construction works services, as well as the construction materials. This is the block that we will be actively working with the partners in the future, because to solve this independently we can't. But we want to become a part of that complicated journey, because we would really want to show what is on average the cost of asphalt, a brick or doors. That would be a useful information from the point of view of analytics, from the point of view of business who wants to enter tenders or build new factories. And finally, this is also interesting analytical information for the clients themselves who are putting together the cost estimates. So what we are planning to do next? Of course, this is still some plans which are in various stages of preparation, and finally our job is to develop jointly with the whole ecosystem DREAM, and since DREAM is moving in the direction of the system of managing public investments, same, we want to be the component that is responsible in DREAM for this civil control, monitoring, analysis, and feedback on the public investment projects. That's a difficult journey. We don't yet understand what's with this project of public investment. We don't have the official clarification for the Ministry of Finance that we should apply common sense, but common sense is so different within various officials. We do believe that there should be a separate general system be created where every person should see what is built, what is constructed, what is developed at the expense of the taxpayers, and they should have some instruments to influence that, same as the instruments which are already built by us now, the instruments with comments, with some complaints that you can leave for each object. You can see that slide down, you can write the comment that it is terrible or not, or you can keep a complaint that we need to work on together with the partners in the mode of turning citizen feedback. We really love that this is more. We are also waiting for the implementation of the relevant modules, for instance, for electronic democracy, where we could also integrate, and many other ideas. That's why I'm convinced that year 2026 will also be very active in terms of the development. And finally, we will be moving forward to make sure when we talk about the ecosystem of recovery that really would have the picture which you could also see, but you could also influence on what is happening. And in reality, all that this information is actionable. I don't trust in open data that exists for the sake of being open. Just massive of data sets, and we are hypocrites saying that everybody can download this file and open it up on your own computer. That's, softly speaking, it doesn't work like that. It works when people can easily understand what is happening nearby regarding the things which are important for them, and that you should have really simple, accessible instruments how to influence that and how to respond to that. We are working on this, and the IT part will continue to be on us, on our organization, technologies of progress. That's why all wishes, criticism, and sometimes praise, please do send over to us. We will be responding. Thank you very much. And once again, 2026, there will be lots of work ahead of us. Thank you, Max. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for doing, I'm walking over these objects, checking all the photographs and monitoring. That's really great. I wanted to once again emphasize, we now see 119 people listening to us. I believe there will be more people listening to our recordings. Please go into the portal in case you're from some city, small, maybe rural area or the capital, and you know that there is somewhere an object that is being restored. Please go there, make a photograph, and send in your monitoring report. That is now can be done. Another reflection to what Max said, 700 objects, that's already a big sample. That's quite a good statistical result. So in case only 5% of the feedback is negative, that means despite the war, despite what Natalia showed to us, that the destruction continues and that there is little money in the budget, the recovery is still happening. The kindergartens, the schools are rebuilt. So I wanted to thank everybody who is contributing their hands, brains, and coming to the ones who are working over the recovery. I would like to now, in 1 second, to invite Maryna Denysiuk. Maryna is the Deputy Minister of Infrastructure and Regional Development, And now exactly she is implementing that comprehensive system of public investment management. That's what we call in English PIM, PIM. This is the system for the transparent, proper priority usage of funds for the recovery and development. And this reform is aligned with the International Monetary Fund, with the European Union. The EU has been supporting it a lot, and it includes reform of planning by combining strategic midterm plans as well as unified project portfolio that is shaped at the local level. The system integrates in such a way both dream and the local planning and the strategic planning, and we are very happy that it has finally started, but we can also see that there are certain challenges. That's why we wanted to talk with Maryna how this transition from just recovery to public investment management is happening, which challenges are seen by the ministry, and to the extent that the implementation of the reform is still successful. Ms. Maryna, the floor is yours. Thank you. I will have some questions to the first presentation. I saw the cost of recovery, 300 billion per year. It would be very much interesting, maybe in chat, if you could write down the amount, how much is distributed between the state budget, the local, and the regional budgets. Because in the slides further, you can see by local and regional budgets, but the figures are not mentioned, but it's very difficult to identify them. That is for statistics. It was for 3 years, but it was mentioning a separate year and 9 months of with some assumption for the fourth quarter. Okay, so I will put this in. Thank you so much for the invitation. It was very interesting to see and to hear the civil society in terms of recovery and monitoring. These are the main remarks. They do exist. We are trying every year to improve them, to open up more, to make the system more transparent. And one of the instruments, as you mentioned, this is the public investment reform that was officially launched in 2024 with the adoption of the roadmap and the action plan. And correspondingly after that, this year, in the beginning, we adopted changes to the budget code, creating the foundation to all other changes, but most importantly that we are moving from ad hoc, unstructured formulation of our requests to clear instruments, clear and transparent understanding where we have the priorities, what money is enough for and what not. What I mean, we have at the moment clearly defined forms where the information is uploaded about the project. The quality of filling out these forms is still a challenge. We are trying from the ministry's side by 2 teams to work at the regional level, national level, to make sure we could give all the answers to questions from communities. We are also engaging the assistance from Great Britain in terms of training of the 5 case model that served as the foundation for the form to fill out this information per project. And the hardest part remains the financial and economical calculations and calculating scenarios of some technical solutions and the scenarios of financing, which are mechanisms of financing. We all understand that our budget capacities are limited, both at the national as well as the local level. So one of the priority areas is in the implementation of the projects is defined as the public-private partnership. For this, the law even has been changed and introduced the regulation and the maximum simplification of procedures for smaller projects, the possibility of some additional financing grants to make sure we would have more opportunities to implement the projects. In addition to that, 2 instruments from the World Bank and from the BRD instruments have been implemented. These are the instruments for the preparation of projects, but still the preparation of the project remains the biggest bottleneck until we get high-quality projects. So we still need a stage of selecting the projects, preparation of projects, to make sure that these projects which we're getting in the end, that they would be possible to implement them in a high-quality manner. Nowadays, after the latest change of the portfolio, we have 195 projects and programs. Out of them, 60 projects and 30 programs. What does it mean? Program, it's an instrument of the state policy that's like this is like a basket, this is like an area that needs to be at the expense of the regional projects and projects from Hromadas that we would need to fill in with projects. Something like a state program with some wide frameworks where you can upload the project. That's why nowadays we have 60 projects. And let me remind you that the previous year this was, Viktor can remind me, I think it was 800. So when we moved to the full-scale system, we received a much lesser amount of projects. Out of them, 60, this is the national level. In terms of the regional level, the preparation of midterm plans and approving single projects, single portfolio projects. This is available with Viktor. The preparation is still ongoing, and we can see 30% of all Hromadas have created the midterm plans. This is the foundation for the further development of the project. And for the first pilot year, that's a huge indicator. And let me remind you that in Europe, our projects, the reform was implemented much longer. We are trying to make it like from the wheels on the go. We understand that this has to be prioritized both inside for the most effective usage of the limited resource from the budget, as well as for partners to engage additional financing. As already said, the first and most critical level is the preparation of projects, and not starting even at the single portfolio of projects, but even before that, after the regions, Hromadas have formed their regional plans, their assistance in crystallizing most priority projects, which they can be financed from the budget, own budget, at the expense of the state fund of the regional development or other instruments, and clear understanding what goes what after what, that is something that requires additional resources allocation, as well as training. We call ourselves PIMologists. These are the people who understand all the terminology, because we have our own system of the four-letter words and abbreviations, which are understood only by the people who only start to implement this reform at the national level. That's why trainings and learning by doing kind of mode, that's the best way to learn in this particular case. Not just giving lectures, but really be there and together with the people in Hromadas to really work on priority projects and to describe them, to search for the information. And it's important to have forming the statistical databases. This was also the biggest challenge when we formed some energy-related plans. They still remain actual of forming these databases for using in the description of projects. This is still a challenge. And number 3 challenge with which we are working, this is like more of a process point of view, because we just started the reform and we have a huge number of legislative acts which are still in the development phase. Correspondingly, we have white spots, we have errors which are being corrected consequentially, but this is like a controlled challenge with which we continue to address together with the Dream team, with Viktor. They also created a system from the wheels, as we say, they went through each stage themselves. We had the system failures and some things which were not working. But this is the time, these are our challenges. So thanks to Dream, they're always nearby. At night, during the day, they helped us. They would check and correct the systems. But this test period, we are starting like in the process, in progress, implementing. So we will be all justifying it, making it better and better every time. And as Mark said, it's very difficult to show the system, not the presentation, but when the system is operating, the system is also getting concerned, same as Dream. Once we start to launch the upload the projects, the system starts to be nervous and sometimes it goes down. So we have to bring it back to senses, and we're working to make sure we can provide transparency for the selection of projects, and we take the experience of other countries, not to step on the same rails. But there are some special conditions. We have the conditions of war. Not all projects are strategic. We have to react here and now. We can't do anything with it because sometimes it is shelling where we didn't expect, and because we need to engage financing at the expense of bigger period of time. But still, the quick response to the war challenges, it makes system not stable from the point of view of our requests to partners. Therefore, this is the issue related to challenges. We should take it out from the system because it will be more understandable for our partners. These survival needs or urgent needs, they need to be communicated separately, but not in the general system, to make sure that their architecture would allow us to use them during the period of recovery. I will be completing my speech here, not to take too much time. More about the regional level and about the work of the system will be said by Viktor. I really love this optimism because the reform and the dream, everything is built from scratch and in very difficult conditions. I believe that these conditions are not only at the central level, but also at the local level, especially in the East. They are really the challenges for life and for the implementation of the reforms and for the physical and factual recovery. So we are very happy that everything is moving forward, and it seems like things are moving in the proper direction, and that you need to fine-tune something that is an absolute norm, and that's how it should be. I would like to take the floor, Viktor Nestulia. He is the Dream digital restoration system for accountable management. I think everybody has already forgotten how it's decoded, because Dream has become really a generic name. The ones who are connected with the recovery. So, Viktor, could you tell us how did you see the transition to PIM and what are the main challenges working on the ground? Welcome, colleagues. We don't already decode Dream as digital restoration for accountable management. This is the stage that the system has gone through, and we call Dream as the public investment management system because we're working for a long time together with the Ministry of Development and the partner ministries such as the Minfin and the economy and the government in order to move this issue from the experimental project, the projects that are Big Recovery Portal is handling, to some really comprehensive system of public investment management system that is already regulated. The norms are defined at the level of the budget code, bylaws. Not everything is complete, but the process is ongoing. And always I have this analogy with the Prozoro start. The piloting of Prozoro took 15 months from the moment that the system was launched in the experimental project until the law was preparing and mandatory usage of the system for the central level. Some 15 months went through, and in reality, the picture of implementation is mirrored. At that time, when there was no regulation of procurement of there were lots of incomplete tenders. We seem like to have done the procedure, but no normative law would force us to register it in the Prozoro, and we were not doing this. And when you open up the historical data of Prozoro.org, you can see how many tenders are there without the status of completion. Also, Maxim was mentioning about that. Nowadays, there are not any conditions. The control that the project has to be completed, and at the moment, two resolutions have been prepared about the exhaustive final assessment, which regulates how the initiator of the project should report that all of the objectives set are achieved, how we have used up the resource, what were the challenges and the like. And there is a resolution about the impact assessment that would foresee the return to revising the results of these public investments in some 3 years, because one issue is to build the infrastructure object, but the different story is to look at what social and economic impact after this investment in the development of one or the other hromada. That's why it's an absolutely normal evolutional way for piloting, experimenting, studying, and scaling up. When I come to the question how we are moving through the evolution from the development into public investment, very interesting and very curious. This is the world where there are lots of unknowns, many uncertainties, which gradually becomes more understandable, and with some joint effort of many stakeholders, it gradually, let's put it this way, it gets a certain format, certain form. Maryna recollected about the sectoral portfolios, the 5Ks model that laid foundation of the Ukraine policy of producing feasibility studies. These are the things which are understandable, they are regulated at the level of the bylaws, and they are gradually are implemented into the system. Nevertheless, it's clear that the bylaws still require some cosmetic fine-tuning. But one issue is the bylaw that defines the general framework, but the other story is the technical implementation, the technical requirements for all levels of data, the granularity of data, how to collect it through integration from various registers and the like. And really, it's a huge challenge, both for the ministries, as well as for hromadas, as well as from our team, is the deadlines. Because once you see the TOR within 2 weeks, that it should be already coming to the production environment, it's lots of joy to work together as testers, but it does work. So as of today, Maryna mentioned some figures. So as of today, we have 678 hromadas and 23 oblasts. They have loaded their mid-term plans for the priority public investments into the system. So in case we talk about the number of hromadas that who approved these plans on the paper, there are 900. So gradually, hromadas are picking up what they're doing offline, and they are coming back to online. As of today, on the basis of these midterm plans, hromadas already have started the initiation of 9,730 investment projects. That's a huge number at the level of hromadas. In case we move to hromadas share, at the moment we have 244 single project portfolios or unified project portfolios at the level of hromadas. That's quite a lot, taking into account when the reform started, when they started to work systematically in terms of clarifying these two hromadas, supporting them with trainings and the like. So we are expecting that until the end of November, we will move 500 plus of the single project portfolios, which is quite good for the first year of the reform. So where we are now, as already mentioned, from the point of view of the legislation, everything seems to be almost all regulated. We are not yet finalized with the logic of implementation and reporting and assessment. At the moment, we are working over this logic jointly with the 3 ministries. And gradually, we are preparing for the big technical update of DREAM in part of the implementing public investment projects. And what's not easy, the implementation of the projects of public investments, because the public investment projects, its implementation seemed like a simple job in case it's a shelter in one school when you are the initiator and you are responsible for one object and you are the executor. But in case it's a comprehensive project that pertains to some energy facility where you have 10 components, 20 objects for investments, 7 different clients and the like, and all of these stories have to be foreseen in the technical implementation, because one issue is when we are collecting paper reports from all legal entities, but the other story is how to organize the parallel process of working with the system of different legal entities, different executors, offices in parallel, integrating the procurement with Prozoro, the payments from the Treasury Office. That's why the PAM implementation, it's not a simple job, and it has the reporting component. That is something that will be, of course, very interesting for the colleagues from BRP and the whole community that works on that, because once again, using the example that was shown by Max, we have the initiators of the projects, which are still using the old piloting functionality. They are reporting every month about the financial execution, how much money, even if it's not the budget money, fixing with photographs what is happening on the ground, reporting on keeping the deadlines of the project, reporting on some technical problems, the quality control and the like. This is implemented at the level of the functionality, but the discipline to execute this was not there. And this story will be now regulated, and in essence, also, it will be required by the Minister of Finances for the analysis of something that is happening to the resource, because this is also part of the liquidity management. When we see that we have 10,000 projects at the local budgets, there are big projects and dozens of projects at the national level, we have to understand how we are planning funds, how we are using funds, how we are moving in terms of progress. Does it make sense to wait for the November to redistribute something, or maybe some red flags have already worked and we are proactively understanding that we should make some managerial decisions. So this functionality is being designed. In case we talk about the program of public investments, that's an interesting challenge. For next year, 29 programs of public investments have received confirmed financing. That means that all 29 programs will be using DREAM for the choice of the projects, structuring the requirements of the applicants, criteria for prioritization, and the like. This year, we worked at the same time with 4 of such programs. That is very difficult because every program has its own specificity of prioritization. Ministry of Science is looking at which professions are provided by this institution and how to take it into account to make sure that it is really taking into account, how many shellings were by Shaheds and to which level of risk it belongs. This is all behind the roof, and every initiator of the program evidently wants to have their own customer prioritization. When there are 4 of them, you can provide it. But when there are 29 of them, it's not realistic to provide that. So at the moment, we're working with colleagues, the so-called the procedures for prioritization. Like we have the procedures, we have some open tenders, the request for pricing proposals, and after the choice of the procedures, you're moving along a certain road. So that's why we are working on the logic, which method of prioritization you want to use, and depending on the method, you have a certain construction. What DREAM can propose to you as a technical solution with what you can work, and which requirements you can customize yourself, and what formulas, weighted prioritization, or simple arithmetic calculation, or the index of prioritization, and the like. This is interesting, and of course, the life cycle of the public investment program. Today in the morning, we had a meeting, just another meeting of the Commission on considering the projects that were submitted to the Recovery EAB3. By the way, thank you to colleagues from BRP who are part of the integrity group that analyzes projects, give their proposals. So there are so many cases that something happened to the project. There are some adjustments. Somewhere they may not have used up all the money. Somewhere there's been a different shelling, or some Chromada received the money from the donor and found money from a different donor and wants to refuse from these funds. So we have to understand the life cycle of the program. It's quite complicated, and it has to be all taken into account into the business processes to make sure that we could operate high quality data and could with confidence to say that yes, within one click I can tell you that what is happening as of today in general about the program, about very specific oblast, specific sector, specific object, specific source of financing the object. This is not a really trivial logic, but lots of efforts are put in to make sure we could analyze all possible scenarios. We have the focus groups, Hromadas, initiators of the program, with whom we have to model this, and step by step we will be implementing. So I'm quite sure that within the first cycle, things will not be perfect. We won't be able to make everybody happy because of the lack of time and the resources. Nevertheless, step by step, we can build up a mature system that can provide for any priority and any interests. And finally, what is probably most interesting and most important as of now is this is the work between the teams of development of Ministry of Finances and our team in the context of integration of DREAM with various state systems. That's a super important story because now the information about the payments is coming from spending. Spendings also have certain their own challenges with the quality of the data. And that's a great instrument, but at the level of working with any system, it requires and it poses certain challenges. So we have now principally approved the concept of integration between the two ministries. In the nearest of time, it will be approved by the Committee of Ministers, and we're deep diving into this integration to provide integration not only at the level of the execution, but also at the level of planning of the budget, to make sure that we would immediately will be able, via the DREAM instruments, we could see what is happening within the system of available resources, supported projects, used money, and the like. So I believe there will be a huge focus next year. Unlikely something super quickly will take place. Nevertheless, it's not about the speed, it's about having a system. We're talking about finances, we're talking about the reporting, about accounting, and that's where we would need to invest lots of time to more optimistically, like on the 7th of November next year, we would be sitting down and would be saying that now we are opening up any budget program used in the public investment program, and we can see full situation, real time, broken down by monthly reporting, and we do trust this data. We are not there yet. And I want to shed more light on some two more additional aspects on which we're working nowadays. In the first place, that's deepening integration with the single state, single system of state construction. That's a great thing, that it's really simplifying a lot of processes. So colleagues from the system are working on many modules, including the model of pricing. Maxine was recollecting about the changes in the law about public procurement, about the publication of the machine-read cost estimates. Personally, I believe this is not the correct change because it cures the consequences, but it doesn't cure the root causes. So that should be a systematic solution on this system, about this system of pricing that will help to monitor and help the initiatives of PIPs to fulfill the requirements of the Ministry of Finances, order number 316 about forming the budget of the project, and in the future it will help us to better monitor their implementation, decrease the risks of changing the value of the projects. And in this story, together with this system, we have the roadmap to deepen our integration. And in case we have our international partners here, I call on you to support colleagues from this Ministry of Development, from this system of the unified system of construction. That's a resource challenge. We would like to ask you, please do support this system of unified construction system. So in case we are translated, I apologize for my tempo, because I just now see that we now have as the interpreter. Apologies for that. And I hope that he was catching up. I think the simultaneous translator is damning me. I just now realized that we have the translation. So my last topic from my side, that's the integration of managing public investment, integration with the system of strategic planning. And that's where we have several stages. In August, the government approved the concept, in essence, of reforming the strategic planning at the state level. Now the Ministry of Economy is preparing the bylaws that will define the order of building up sectoral strategies, and the Ministry of Economy is working on relevant IT solutions that will provide for the forming and monitoring of sectoral strategies. At the same time, the Ministry of Development for several years is working on the implementation of the geoinformational system of regional development. That's an important element also in managing public investment, not only for the development, which in essence contains municipal statistics, a number of data sets that help in making managerial decisions, strategic decisions, where to develop Hromada and the like. And also this is the instrument that structures the state strategy, regional strategies, and the strategies of the development of territorial communities with the relevant operational plans, assignments. Now we have some work ongoing on upgrading methodological recommendations. Also at the level of strategizing, Hromadas should think about future midterm plans, so they would be organically appearing during strategizing. And this whole issue is integrating, and it's important for us to integrate DREAM in the context of decision-making, because now we are operating in vacuum. Of course, it's good that we have defined the demand, we have defined the source of financing and the like. I would fully support Maryna that we really need to learn and learn to improve the quality of work with the feasibility studies. And by the way, this is the topic, since now this cycle, the majority of the initiatives of the project perceive not as the preparation of feasibility study, but rather as the requirement of filling in DREAM. Some people have some historical projects, and they are simply looking that we need to have one information to be moved to some structure. And we now have to work on the analysis, because feasibility study is not about filling forms. That's a huge analytical work that foresees research, data collection, and as a result, of course, filling out DREAM forms. And to this evolution, we need to work with Hromadas, but that's natural that in the limited time mode, nobody looks at that like this. But again, going back, when we provide the high quality data collection and integration, we will be also working on modeling, because the initiation of some project, it is happening not only in vacuum, but in the context of the development, understanding the statistical data, the tendencies, IDPs, the capacity of the educational network, the medical network, taking into account that we'll be able to see which coverage in different services in doctors. We now have active work with sectoral ministries, including with the state statistics, to organize, so to speak, the pipeline data, GIS data collection, to make sure that the instrument would help not to help with to the sectoral ministry, because the sectoral strategies and DCRR have to really coexist. So summarizing, although we have very high tempo and the reforms are very comprehensive and complex, we can see that the level of its implementation and perception is really improving. And It's really from denial, starting from denial and to accepting, and the development, the movement is positive. It's evident that the government officials who are responsible for this reform, they see all the challenges. They are permanently talking to Hromadas, and there are certain adjustments of this policy for the next cycle to make sure we could continue this reform, not for the sake of the tick mark that we're doing this reform, but exactly about the high quality result, planning investments and the like. And that's really great that we have this ecosystem of managing public investment, and the partners such as CES, the Institute of Economic Research, EBRD, and Technologies of Progress, as well as other systems who are working with this ecosystem. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But thank you, colleagues. In case there are any questions, please. Thank you so much for this very detailed, very interesting. I have really two questions. We have one question from the registration, and especially for Maryna, we have actually 3 minutes. I will use my right of the moderator. So the first question from the registration, and it's quite interesting because we still have the project of the civil monitoring, and this is the question of the participation in the monitoring. So the person is asking in which way the civil society can influence the prioritization of the projects and what is happening in case there is no clear mechanism of participation in recovery and reconstruction, and legislatively this is not regulated. So possibly either Viktor or Maryna can reply what is with the participation of the civil society, what is with the public discussions, what we could do for a person in their city or in the village. Maryna, could you reply, or maybe Viktor? I can see that Oleksandra is also ready. Let us start with Oleksandra. Oleksandra, please. Once again, the experience of monitoring, it shows that a lot depends on the Hromadas, whether there is any activist or the civil organization on the ground. We do have instruments how the civil society can be engaged in the process of recovery, some public hearings, some meetings. It's clear, but it depends a lot on the Hromadas. The law on mandatory public hearings is adopted, but it will be coming into effect after the war. So for the time being, there should be a certain consensus from the Hromada. At the same time, we are talking about the strategy of development of this. There should be prioritization made on the basis of which there should be plans for the priority investments made. So basically, about the strategies, the citizens have to be engaged as the population. But in case we talk about the strategic plans, sometimes the parliamentaries are not engaged. It's all decided only by the executive authorities, local self-governments. So in case there is some vision and some ambition from the citizens, of course you can reach something, but there are no mandatory instruments. Then I would like to add a few things. Of course, it's disarguable in terms of engagement of parliamentaries, because sometimes parliamentaries have excluded them. At the level of the Hromadas, you won't receive the result, but even the recommendations of the Minfin is not to include the parliamentaries into the interagency commission. But answering your question, now, apart from the instruments that BRP is planning, now, on the basis of the earlier prepared concept of electronic democracy in DREAM, we are preparing a pilot project that the Ministry of Development is implementing together with the World Bank, and it foresees testing of various approaches of engaging citizens in 9 piloted Hromadas. The testing, which mechanisms will be actually working, not for the tick mark, but we will be giving the outcome and switching people on. And then the successful things will be scaled up for the whole framework of the reform via this pilot. Nevertheless, already now, In the requirements for the preparation of feasibility studies, there is the mandatory block that demands from the initiator of the project to inform in which way they engaged various stakeholders, whether there was some public hearings, in case they will be, where they will be. So it is really foreseen there. The other issue that this practice needs to be moved forward, tested, and to find some ideal examples, and to really show to other examples why such dialogue brings to more high-quality results. Thank you, Viktor. Okay, we are above time. That's why I would like now to complete our event, and I'd like to thank to everybody who has joined into our webinar. My name is Maria Rybko. I'm the Deputy Director of the Center of Economic Strategy. This was the project of controlling the recovery costs financed by the European Union, and we're doing it, the Center of Economic Strategy, the Institute of Economic Research and Policy Consultations, as well as the NGO Technologies of Progress. Do come into our website, leave your feedback about the projects that are being rebuilt in your villages and cities, follow the news. Have a nice and safe evening, and do donate to Armed Forces of Ukraine.